The whole crew. The band's back together. Welcome back, Adam.
Thank you.
Where in the world were you? Beijing, Moscow, Pyongyang?
The Hague.
Pyongyang.
Hey,
He was up saying his
you're
friends.
building the case against Israel. He's our man. Huh?
Yeah, you were helping out with the prosecution. Israeli prosecution. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, I was working with the Dutch foreign minister.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Didn't go over so well, though.
No.
He's a bit of an Israel lover.
No. He just resigned.
Oh,
yeah.
No, not the new one. Yeah.
Yeah, he's resigned because, well, as an act of conscience. I mean, there was something specific, obviously, that he couldn't. I think he was just saying that
Cancelling weapons supply.
Right. Israel. Okay. So making some kind of concrete move to.
He was attempting
more than just words of support for Gaza.
Yeah, and then it all just.
He resigned yesterday.
Didn't go anywhere.
And other ministers followed him. Does that mean the Dutch government could collapse? Because I know it's a tight coalition. They've already lost Geert Wilders in June. It's barely hanging together.
Well, the foreign minister's party, what was it called?
I think it's just like a center right.
New social contract.
Yeah, it's sort of mainstream, but center right.
Yeah, they all quit. So don't know exactly where that leaves the rest of everything. I had assumed that it was just kind of a not a big enough splash to make a big wave. But
well, it might in the Netherlands, but yeah, maybe not internationally. We'll see. I mean, you would like governments to fall all over the place over this issue, but that's either a ways off or a pipe dream, depending on how tightly in league with one another they all are. But the Dutch government, like any other Western government, is feeling the pressure from population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The total media information space control can only get you so far. We've got all kinds of scenes that came to mind this week. Wasn't there something from the US where I'm trying to remember? Is he he's not a government minister, but he's a politician. Maybe he's a rep, House of Representatives guy. He's giving a town hall somewhere in like leafy middle class New England somewhere, and he's getting screamed at by people over his position on Gaza and sending weapons to Israel and stuff like that. So that's even in the United States, that's not, student protesters who we can deport. That's that's boomer type. Everything is fine. People who are screaming that they're displeasure with what's going on. So all of it will be too late, of course. The recent trend is most of it's lip service. So the Dutch minister resigned apparently because he couldn't see words being translated into some actions regarding the limitation. The Netherlands, by the way, but what it probably pertains to, the Netherlands apparently is key in the supply and repair of the Israelis' Air Force. Ultimately, of course, we all know it comes from the US, but apparently for maintenance and so on and parts, it's the Netherlands that provides it. That was probably the concrete issue that he resigned over. But in the meantime, you have got, even Macron, the two-faced, nonsensical. Sometimes he makes sense, sometimes he says the opposite. Saying things like next month he intends to announce as President of France at the UN General Assembly in New York that France recognizes Palestine, which kind of is a second wave of EU countries. Initially it was France, Spain, Belgium, maybe Norway's in that group, Slovakia or Slovenia, and now you've got some of the big countries saying they'll do the same thing. Netanyahu spitting, that means Macron is Hamas or something like that. The usual nonsense reply. but he knows that it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, oh, I recognize this desolate landscape that's completely bulldozed as a country that no longer even has any people in it. It's super sick, but still, it speaks to the pressure, the common sense pressure they're under from most people, that it's gone way too far.
Just with the Netherlands specifically, I went to just a local lake for hanging out with friends and family, and it was maybe 3/4 non-white. You had people who were clearly from Africa. They had like banners and kinds of things, and then you had people who were speaking Arabic, and it was a hodgepodge of.
They had banners. So was this a kind of an organized protest event?
No. It wasn't. It was just like a birthday party.
Oh, okay.
But the point was that they were still attached to their heritage. So they have a lot of immigration, a lot of immigrants, a lot of foreigners, a lot of whom will at this point. There's a number of them who have been there for a long time, and so they're more or less integrated. They speak Dutch and whatever. But then there's all the new wave who are still getting
asylum
and all that, and so you have this twofold problem for the Dutch government, which is all of these new immigrants that you're bringing in are on the side of the Palestinians. At the same time, there is a ton of lefty liberal types among the actual Dutch.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they still have massive pride parades and all that stuff. And they are also...
The Dutch? No way.
They are also on the side of the Palestinians. So they're only making the problems worse for themselves by continuing with their policies of stupidity.
What do you mean, of supporting Israel?
Of supporting Israel while also bringing in people who are not supportive of Israel.
Yeah. Well, it's the glaring contradiction in the entire post 9/11 world decades. I mean, it's staring everyone in the face,
Yeah. Who are they bringing?
Let's bring in loads of people of this religion.
Who are they bringing in that are not supportive of Israel?
Middle Easterners.
Well, some of them would be. A lot of them would be. Oh, supportive of Israel. Sorry, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Clash of the stupid people.
Clash of if there was a devious plan, if there was a devious hand behind it, capitalizing it and making it so, it's. Do you tell me? Do you think it's working? Because you see on Twitter, especially on American accounts, oh my God, look at this ruckus in the Netherlands or Paris or wherever, there's a clash of civilizations taking place. But you've seen that in a tightly packed, one of the most densely populated places on earth, actually, the Netherlands, it's largely fine. Everything is, I mean, shit's going on in some suburbs and, projects and stuff, but overwhelmingly it's cooperation. What this is leading up to is, so long as European governments can keep a lid on the time bomb of native white European population, and in the case of the Netherlands and France and Germany, 10, 12, 15, I think higher in Germany, percentage minority that's Muslim, largely Muslim. If they can keep a lid on it long enough, those populations will realize, even though we seem to be very different, we have far more in common with each other than the Israelis, who are just on a whole other spectrum over here. They're not even on the reservation. They're beyond the pale.
Yeah, the Netherlands is a bit interesting in the respect of them being like more atheistic than say the UK. There's a fair number of churches in the Netherlands, but a lot of them are not functional anymore. They're not acting as churches. There's not like a mass or anything like that going on there. And in fact, in a couple of places, in Amsterdam specifically, there's a couple that are, I don't know how to describe it other than like houses of sin.
Oh yeah. Was that your first time seeing that?
The first time,
you poor thing.
Yeah, it was. I was like, what is this?
I remember as a kid, I went to Amsterdam.
You remember as a kid when you went to a brothel?
Well, I was taken by my parents, to expand, to culturally enrich me. My liberal parents decided, let's take a train up to. We lived in Belgium. Let's take a train up to Amsterdam, and the beautiful canals and the parks and the Van Rijk Museum and ads for bestiality theater shows. I'm like, Mom, what's that? And the peep shows and the red light districts.
It's only a small area, though.
Thankfully, yeah. The Dutch have a way of compartmentalizing this in their heads that somehow makes sense to them.
Full of Jews. Anyway, what were we? What are we actually talking about here? We spent the last 20 minutes talking about Holland.
No, well, we want to talk about the Euros in DC last week and what's going to happen here with Ukraine. Trump's mass Euro meeting. Yeah. What's the upshot of it? Everyone seems to be happy. Like the week before, Russia and the US are happy with 10 out of 10 Alaska summit. Okay, looks like that's good. Okay. And then hot on the heels of that, the Euros all lined up saying, can we talk to you? Can we talk to you? Okay, all of you come together. And they all leave happy. The upshot of it in the mainstream media in the United States and in Europe was so happy clappy about that summit of Trump with Euro leaders that Hillary Clinton is going on podcasts saying that she likes Trump now.
And she might like him.
That's how
she might.
Yeah.
If anything comes of it, she might nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Did you say that?
Yeah. But only if something comes of it. Only if he achieves what she wanted to achieve, which is the subjugation of Russia. Defeat Russia. One way or another. Defeat the Ruskies. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So there's great optics, but what are those monkeys in the Oval Office so happy about with the security guarantees?
Well, they can't be very happy because they were brought over there on a big yellow fun bus. They weren't even greeted by Trump. They're brought over as the vassals that they actually are. When it comes to America and when it comes to foreign policy of any kind, at the very least, most European leaders, especially those ones that went, are all obviously vassals to America. They go cap in hand to see Daddy. Mark Rutte
actually used the term.
He's Daddy. And yes, Daddy, what do you want, Daddy? And that kind of stuff, and it's a bit embarrassing in a certain sense for them because although it's not really, it's good that it's been shown in public because that's the kind of thing that had to go on, that went on before under Biden and previous administrations. They knew
this was how it is,
that they were the low man in the totem pole kind of thing. But it was, they were treated with a bit more respect, I suppose. They pretended, the Americans would have pretended. At least officially, they wouldn't have brought it out. They wouldn't have aired that kind of laundry in public. But Trump has no problem doing that because Trump likes to appear as the decider, right? He's the top dog. He's Daddy. And he likes the whole world to know that. Previous administrations didn't care for that kind of showmanship, and it was actually anathema to the general way that the Western world has been run before, which is all done in secret, and you do it, you present all a common face to the population and stuff. You don't show what goes on behind the scenes. It's embarrassing. It's lowbrow. It's not. We're all intellectuals, whereas Trump isn't necessarily. He doesn't subscribe to that, and he likes to take every opportunity to show that he's top dog, daddy. Come on, children. So it's a cult of personality, I'd say in that respect, there's a cult of personality around Trump, and it has one member, and that's Trump himself. He is his greatest fan. He is his own dear leader. A lot of MAGA people see him to one extent or another like that, but he absolutely. I mean, I don't think in the way that Kim Jong Il is Kim Jong Un is presented. To whatever extent those people in North Korea actually see him as dear leader and love him. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
It could well be. There's no MAGA members who see Trump in that way. They're not that devoted to him. Some of them maybe are, like you, but
True,
not
true.
but not most of them. They just see him as, look, he's going to do what we want him to do. He's our president. That's the kind of thing. But in terms of the way the North Koreans treat Kim Jong Un, he's Trump treats himself like that.
Yeah.
He basically worships that. If there was a giant statue of Trump somewhere in gold leaf, Trump would go and pay homage to it, because he refers to himself in the third person. He talks about Trump. Trump did this and Trump did that.
Yeah.
It's like he can't dissociate himself from himself and see how awesome he is from a distance. Almost literally. He steps outside of his own body, looks at himself and says, "Wow, you are the best."
I think he has said on the record he would like to be worshipped like Kim Jong-un.
Well, he's not the only one. That's the thing as well, is that
he's honest though.
Exactly. He's honest. And that's the one thing you can say about Trump, is that he can't hold his tongue. He doesn't stand on ceremony. He doesn't care for airs and graces and that kind of stuff. He likes just
implying nuance.
No, he's just straight up, and he tells it like he sees it, which is good, because you get to see a lot more than you did in the past, when they would basically just lie to you all the time, and they're the bunch of kiddie fiddlers behind the scenes, and then come out and go to mass or something like that. So you wouldn't really. I don't think Trump is that kind of person. Anyway, so they all go to the White House, cap in hand, yes, daddy, and they're forced into these positions. Like, you can see Trump is actually he could have actually met them, but he didn't bother his ass. He had the chief of protocol, I think her name is, or her title is. She met them,
Crowley,
at the White House, and brought them in. The only one he actually met was Zelensky. Trump actually personally met Zelensky as he arrived at the White House, but the others were all chief of protocol. Just bring those people in. Sit them outside, even though that was a fake picture of them all sitting outside. There is one of them in the actual Oval Office, all sitting around in a circle, saying, Trump's like, "Now listen up, children. Here's what we're going to
have
do.
It here.
Now listen, children. Here's what we're going to do."
Beautiful picture.
Yeah,
Trump's view, and then
so Daddy's telling them what's going on, and Zelensky's there, and they're all
a situation map of Ukraine.
Yeah. And they're all pretending like, yes, we're all part of the top team here, you know what I mean? But obviously, that's like the boss telling you all what has to happen,
Yeah.
And of course, the EU was a project when it was created of the Americans. Basically, the European Union was very definitely a project of the Americans in order to keep Europe together. Like, they wanted to keep. They anticipated the fall of the Soviet Union. They didn't want things to fall apart and it all to be dispersed, and countries in Europe to go east. I mean, it's not even go east. It's like, be part of Eurasia. America always had a problem with holding on to Europe, whatever amount of Europe it wanted, Western Europe, because it's not part of America. It's separated by 3,000 miles of Atlantic Ocean, and it's part of a contiguous landmass with Russia and the Middle East and all that kind of stuff. So
pipelines, rail network, communications were always going to.
Yeah. So in order to not after the fall of the Soviet Union and things opening up after that, they were worried about losing Europe. So well, before that, during the actual Cold War, they hatched this plan for a European Union that would be based on, Western liberal, neoliberal, rules-based international order, golden billion ideology, and draw the map around it of as much as possible. Of course, at the time they were limited to the Western Europe, because it was still Eastern Europe was still under the part of they were under the Soviet Union, basically, the Eastern European countries. Anyway, so this is just a legacy of that. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing. People look at this today and they think if they have a very short kind of time span or attention span or awareness of the situation, they go, "Oh, what happened to Europe by our leader being such such cucks to Trump and America and stuff." Like, dude, it's been that way for a very long time. I mean, wake up, look at the inception of the European Union. Last independent European leader was Charles de Gaulle.
Yeah.
Of France. Well, maybe there's a few. They tried, but it was too late afterwards. Anyway, so it's totally normal that they'd be over there, having to, pay homage to Trump, because they've been doing it for quite a long time to other presidents. But Trump is now forcing them to do it in this somewhat embarrassing way, because that's who Trump is. And he likes to show off that this is making America great again. Look, Trump's like, if we've got vassals, right? If we're the undisputed leader of the world, then I want everybody to know it. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna toot my own horn here. So who's our vassals again? What? UK, Germany, France, and the rest of them. Get them over here. Get them to crawl up to me on their knees, kiss my feet,
and beg for security.
And beg for security, because that's what they're actually doing. But I want it on camera.
Yeah.
So the whole world knows who we are, and I am.
This is how it works.
And this is America being great. Of course, a great country has vassals, right? Yeah. People come bringing gifts to the great leader.
One of his gripes during the 4 years of Biden, that nobody shows him any respect. Nobody internationally shows him any respect.
Right.
They don't respect him. Vote for me, they'll respect me.
Yeah.
That was literally
But that was only a facade, because obviously Biden and other presidents aren't the people that you actually go and talk to, right? You can go and talk to them, but they're not the ones who make the decisions. It's deep staters, career bureaucrats and stuff. Behind the scenes, obviously Europeans showed a lot of respect to those people, because they knew they were the movers and shakers. They didn't really care much about the president, So anyway, it's hard to know exactly what was going on, but they had them. This was after Alaska. What was Alaska? Alaska was Trump. It's hard not to conclude that Trump has basically decided, or is saying behind the scenes to Putin, look, I'm going to say a bunch of things and I'm going to be disappointed in you. I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to say some maybe threatening or harsh things or whatever, but you got to understand that that's what I have to say, and that in reality what's going to happen here is that you go ahead and
annex and
go ahead and proceed with the war, win the war militarily, and kind of quote unquote put me in a position, or not put me, but put all of us in a position where we have to accept the fact that create facts in the ground so you make my job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Do more, get to the point where it's indisputable and there's no option for saying, oh no, we can keep fighting, we have to keep fighting. And that will make Trump's job easier of selling and convincing these other people that it should be let go, it should be brought to an end, and there should be Russia should get the territory that it's taken, and whatever makes sense, we can work out a deal, some compromises here and there, whatever, but Russia is going to demand basically all of Donetsk, all of the Donbass. They're even willing to let go of some of Zaporizhia and Kherson, the other two to the south, and freeze it along the front lines, and then a few other details, and there you go. And there'll be security guarantees. I mean, he trusts that Putin will not invade anymore. It'll all stabilize. Well, because Trump wants stability, right? At least in that area, right? He wants to move on to other more pressing issues. So he wants to wrap that up. So, and he sees opportunity, economic opportunity, and how Russia and America can work together and all that kind of stuff. But he has to take into consideration the Europeans' concerns, let's say, and has to make them feel, because the security guarantees aren't just for Ukraine. The security guarantees are for Europe.
Oh yeah.
Right. People keep talking about security guarantees for Ukraine.
The
Europeans are actually over there asking for security guarantees for themselves.
It's their own skin completely. At this point, it's been said 100 times. So apparently they are all as one on this, from Brussels to Berlin to Kiev. Ukraine is Europe's military force against Russia.
Right.
What they're thinking of, they seem to be okay with the de facto reality that Russia has these 4 provinces. They won them in a fair fight. But it's the rest of Ukraine. Macron's idea of a Grande Armée presence of some kind in the rest of Ukraine is still uppermost in their mind. And we heard Starmer and Macron put forward this case again in DC with Trump, and Trump was kind of like yes and no to both. Well, we'll see, kind of stuff, ambiguous. But again, their interpretation of what comes next is some kind of European military presence in the rest of the country, which includes what they called an Article 5-like clause. In other words, Ukraine won't be in NATO legally, de jure. Therefore, we give Russia one of its core 3 conditions. Okay, it satisfies them. Land is one issue. That's the NATO neutral membership of Ukraine. But we're angling to create the conditions where it is as if they are de facto in NATO, because we're going to continue arming them with American weapons we're going to bilk the European taxpayer for.
Right.
So they seem to leave content that their ideas sat well with Trump. You know what I mean? They didn't come back ashen-faced like, oh my God, we live in a totally different world to how Trump sees this going forwards. They seem to leave Washington thinking, oh, okay, our future for Ukraine and Europe and its role as a military bulwark against Russia remains intact.
Yeah, that's all they want.
But meanwhile, in Russia, it's like, no, it remains, there's no chance in hell, their position officially, that you're going to have European troops.
No, well,
in the rest of Ukraine.
But that's not going to happen.
That standoff, that impasse is like
what the Europeans want. And people don't know why the Europeans fear Russia. The European clique, not all of them, obviously, but the ones that, for example, visited Washington and stuff. Why they fear Russia, why they're so anti-Russia and stuff like that. Number one, they only think short term, and only for the short term survival. The individuals, they want to be in power, whether or not they're actually in power. They want their ideology and their clique of people to rule in the specific countries in Europe, which are the major countries, which then have an influence, a controlling influence on the rest of the other countries that may not be ideologically aligned with them, but they can keep them in check. So Macron, Starmer, von der Leyen as head of the EU, Merz in Germany, they're all on board. Now the big countries, Maloney to a large extent, and they're interested in their own survival, their own political survival. It's very useful, as we know, or everybody should know by now, for those kind of people who don't really have a proper mandate from the people. The main thing that they rely on to keep themselves in power is an external threat. Yeah. So, for example, terrorism was very useful, Muslim terrorism, but now Russia is the boogeyman du jour, and that has to keep going. We need to keep Russia as an enemy into the future, at least short term, for our survival. So we can, that's what we have staked our claim to as the leaders of these countries and the group, not just those individuals, but the people around them. So if they didn't have that threat, if relationship with Russia was normalized, no more threat from Russia, you can't use that, very quickly they would be kicked out of power. Basically, they wouldn't win another mandate. And there's also the fear that if Russia becomes too strong and too influential, as was the case, it was going that direction with Russia, particularly with energy reserves, for example, Russian gas supplying most of Europe, Russia being or Europe being very dependent, increasingly dependent on Russian gas and stuff. Why did they kick that up and say, oh, it's not good to rely on one country, which is bullshit, you know what I mean? It's like they had other supplies as well, but if you've got cheap, reliable gas supply from a major country that has like more or less an endless supply of gas, you're an idiot to not just run with that, right? So why do you go, oh, we have to cut that off, let's blow up Nord Stream 1, let's cut off all Russian gas, let's shoot ourselves in the foot while we're at it?
Mm-hmm.
Because ideologically they don't like Russia because, but that's where it comes down to ideology. They're not on the same page as Russia and the Russian government and the Russian mentality ideologically, and they don't want that infiltration into Europe, because then they would also lose their jobs. They would no longer be electable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If because you have to understand, if Russia becomes a very influential country for economically first and foremost, and then by implication or by definition, diplomatically and politically, you're talking about having a shared ideology ultimately. You know what I mean? You can't be very opposed, completely diametrically opposed ideologically, and do business with
You'll end up with a
country.
situation where the Chancellor of Germany, like Schroeder after
exactly.
Iraq War,
that kind of guy.
is so in sync with Moscow, he retires to be on the board of Gazprom.
Right, exactly. So that would spread throughout Europe, and you would basically have most European countries, through that knock-on effect from economics through to politics, etc. You would have a change in ideology, and all these people who in power in Europe today would no longer be able to do business, let's say, with Russia, or they would have to change their ideology, and they don't want to do that. And or you would have other types of people who have a similar ideology to the Russians becoming the political leaders in European countries. So they see it as a sea change. You know, it's probably something they feel more than have actually planned out.
A regime change. Regime in the sense of the general intellectual climate of the country.
And when it comes down to this domination, like we said, they're vassals of Europe, of America, of their US vassals. They're picked, a lot of them are chosen and facilitated and funded, etc., into power in Europe by the Americans. So
it also explains the in-your-face contradiction.
But that's why they're having a problem with Russia, with Putin as well, or not Putin, with Trump, because he seems to be changing the ideology, if you know what I mean. That's the big issue behind all this, like, because these European leaders are vassals, American vassals, and chosen, picked ideologically on the same page as the Americans, and their ideology is world domination. Russia's ideology is multipolarity, sharing, everybody gets a piece of the pie, America, and by extension their European vassals, or we run the world.
Dominance hierarchy.
Right. And that's another fundamental, that's part of the ideological difference between these people and Russia, and that's why they don't like Russia. And that goes back a long time, actually, but in one way or another. But they're having a problem with Trump, because Trump seems to be moving away from that idea of, at least Trump's moving away from the idea of American dominance in the kind of naked imperialistic way that it was run before under the neoliberals, going back multiple decades. In the US, and the Europeans were on board with that, and now Trump's changing that, where it's like, well, we know about it, right? It's being the policeman of the world, protecting everybody. Trump's like, yeah, look, I still want America to be great and to have, be the greatest country in the world and all that kind of stuff, but I just don't agree with the way that you're going about it. And the rest of them are like, hang on a minute, that means it smells a lot like you're going to cut us loose.
It smells a lot like Putin, and that's what they've been charging you with 2016. It smells to us like you're like Putin,
not just like Putin, but it smells to us like it's almost like you're going towards multipolarity in a certain sense. We know that Marco Rubio mentioned multipolarity, that they're becoming they're Americans, this administration anyway, under Trump, are being more realistic about the nature of the world and how the future of the world looks like, and it looks like some version of multipolarity. And in that scenario, the Europeans lose their positions because they got and maintained their positions and their wealth, etc., on hanging on to the coattails of America as this aggressive imperial power, global hegemon. If that's no longer the case, then we, by definition, lose. We're going to have to fight for ourselves. I mean, you're really going to cut us loose, and how are we going to?
We're going to have to turn into Europe first. But the question hanging over the entirety of Europe is, who is that?
Right. Yeah.
Who? In other words, who is our Hitler? That's what no one wants to say out loud. But
there is no Hitler in Europe.
Or Bonaparte, if you want to go back further.
But there can't be, because there's no cohesiveness because of the ideology they pushed, which was anathema to the actual, the will or the political perspective and social and cultural perspective of the majority of people in Europe. These people like Macron and Stormer and all those people are doing exactly the opposite of what the ordinary people in Europe want. So the majority of people in Europe are not going to vote for any of them if they were chosen to be. None of those could be the new Napoleon, because none of them represent the will of the European people.
Yeah.
So they have to hold on to power in whatever way they can.
Yeah, it's existential for them, because we Euro globalists either stay united and retain our control by rigging the elections if we have to, or we're going to be picked off one by one by Putin, by Russian influence, or by the US on the western side, eastern side. We're just going to be picked off.
They're all picked off already by America, but we're going to be lost to. We could be lost to the east, to Russia, etc., and those influences. And the problem is that in Europe, there's already several European countries who are already in that camp. They're already willing, and able to pivot east towards at least to Russia and China, and to restore relations and have a more Eurasian integration perspective.
Yeah.
So it's the hounds. The wolves are at the door, already within Europe. Not even at the door; they're inside the building. And the big four, whatever you want to call them, 4 or 5 European countries have to, under the stewardship of these shit for brains, have to double down, and they're just flailing. Really, they don't know exactly what they're very afraid. Basically, they don't know what the future holds for them. So they're just getting desperate. And the only thing they see is their own personal power, like I said. And one of the main things that motivates them is having an external enemy, because that's what ensures them. They think that's what ensures them renewed success at the ballot box at the polling station.
These crazy bastards, though, I think things would just work out in some surprising and fine ways if they would just yield power. Look at Orban, Fico. Hungary's doing fine. It's prepared to pivot east, but it's still committed to the west. It's still writing love notes to Donald Trump. And the situation, the Ukis keep striking this pipeline that remains going through Ukraine. The Druzhba pipeline that is over 50% of Hungary's energy base. It's oil anyway. It goes to this one. Last week, the Ukis struck it for the third time.
And you know who
inside Russia?
You know who really
with HIMARS?
You know who really struck it? Europeans.
Well, HIMARS, as we learned from those deep dives and investigative reports by the New York Times and the Washington Post, rely entirely on the US ISR satellite surveillance. So, and then Orban writes a letter to Washington and says, please, Donald, speak up for this is a terrible attack against our energy dependence. And Donald replies back, and the foreign minister of Hungary posted on his X feed a handwritten note. This is terrible. They're bad guys. We'll totally support you. You're a great man, Victor. Yeah, but it's HIMARS.
Yeah.
The US fucking did that, basically. The US structure, not Trump. It happened without him. It happened because of the deep state structure. But
he wants to hold on to Europe and wants to screw over Hungary because as a thorn in the European.
And Brussels basically told him to go hang.
Yeah,
he said, "Oh, that's unfortunate."
But that's
not that we give a damn.
That's the Americans/Europeans doing that to Hungary by using Ukraine's hand. So, yeah. So what's the future? What future hold? The future hold. I don't know. One thing is, I mean, there's one that I've been thinking about this week because it came out last week, I think, or even before that. I don't know, but I saw it not so long ago about the. There's a poll, Gallup poll in Ukraine that showed support for.
That's damning. They tried to keep it quiet, but it was
Yeah,
Gallup.
you can't find it actually. You look
I did.
you look up
I found
Ukraine.
it.
You can't find it, but if you do a normal like Google search or even search engine search for
No,
just standard
it's being censored on
phrases like
the news.
Ukraine war public poll or even more
Gallup. Even if you
or even
add the
Gallup.
name of the.
It basically it's an example of censorship. But this is it here actually. I don't know what.
I only found it as a screenshot by.
Yeah, there's one article I found: Ukraine support for war, and this, but it's from I think it's from late last month, maybe so the last couple of weeks. But anyway, it's so 2025 Gallup poll found that 69% of Ukrainians support peace talks to end the conflict as soon as possible. Stark reversal from 2022 when 73% favoured fighting until victory and 52% of those favouring negotiations are open to territorial concessions. So
naturally, because 52% of Ukrainians are basically Russians.
Yeah, well, maybe not, but
or they would have voted consistently as the.
Yeah, maybe, but I think we'll get into that as well about the toll of the war on Ukraine that and the Ukrainian people is being felt really. Significantly, it's getting worse as time goes on, so people at least have a bit of sense, people who responded to this poll at least have a bit of sense. So anyway, the point being that Zelensky, this stands in stark contrast. So you have 69%, so almost 70% of Ukrainians want an end to the war and are happy with
Scroll down so we can see the chart.
There's no chart. It's just a headline. But anyway, just a chart. Like so. Anyway, there's a clear, serious division between the will of the majority of the Ukrainian people and what Zelensky's saying, because they're saying basically end the war, give Russia territory that it has taken, whatever, work it out one way or another. We just want an end to this war. 70%. And Zelensky is like, no, I'm going to keep going. And the Europeans are saying, yeah, Zelensky's going to keep fighting.
To the last Ukrainian.
Fuck the will of the Ukrainian people. Now, if that continues, and so there's a relatively recent poll, we don't know how long. Obviously, this has been going on over the past couple of years, whatever, but it's reaching this level now, and it'll probably get worse as things continue. And you notice also that the Russians have been pushing in that direction as well, of trying to, like in the past few months, they've started attacking the recruitment centers in Ukraine, and it's interesting how Russia does that. The Russians obviously have an awareness of, or have probably have different ways of getting a feel for the public sentiment in Ukraine, and they respond
to amplify or provoke or
they
capitalize.
They respond based on that. They take action based on that, and then they do different things to capitalize on or to push it in that direction. But they know what's happening organically anyway, because people get tired of war. There's war fatigue after 3.5 years and a lot of deaths, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they have a government who is responding to those people, 70% of the population, by saying, fuck you. We're going to keep fighting. And what that means is we're going to keep sending your sons to die. And
because of the war, you're not getting elections because I declared martial law.
Right. So as long as the war continues, Ukraine, as Zelensky stays in power, and the Europeans are happy with that, and the Europeans get to keep Russia as a boogeyman and keep fighting it and bring it to a point where Russia can be the perpetual boogeyman. Like they think, like I said, short term. They want it to last for 10 or 20 years because they'll all be dead by then. Maybe not Macron. Maybe, well, who knows? But 10, 20 years, good enough. They're short-term thinkers, short-term materialist thinkers. Yeah. So what that means for the Russians is, like, if you're in Russia and you look at the history of, if you're in the Russian government, you look at the history, you know well the history of the rules-based international order, as it's called, quote unquote.
Which is whatever we want today.
Which is, it's fine. Basically, it's fine. As exemplified by dozens of times when the West in general, particularly the US, but also the Brits and the French, etc., who have gone into a country and overthrown a government in order to, because it's a corrupt, evil regime that's abusing or in some way infringing the will of its people, or even bombing or killing its people. That is not part of international law, but is part of the rules-based international orders rules.
Yeah.
the rules. What's one of the maybe the rule number one in the rules-based international order is when a people are deemed, if you can make the case that they're being persecuted by their government in some way or other, well, then you're fully entitled, obligated, even under the right to protect, to go in there and take care of that government and get rid of it.
Yeah.
So
and install a proper one.
Install a proper one. So legally and morally, if you want to call it that, right now with this information about the will of what the Ukrainian people want, Russia would be absolutely within its rights, and like I said, even obligated to take out the Ukrainian government, Zelensky and his people, because they are directly infringing, disregarding the will of the large majority of the Ukrainian people. And not only that, but they're killing their own people as they maintain themselves in power against the will of the people and continue to pursue this war. They are actively killing large numbers of Ukrainians. So, if that was the case with America, they'd be in there like fucking white on rice, you know what I mean? It would be like a no-brainer.
When you put it that way, it's so striking the way that they've used that line over and over again for all of their various, interventions in the Middle East and elsewhere. Anytime there was a whiff of anything, even though it was mostly their own farts, they were in there like swimwear and, no-fly zones, bombing everything they can see. And then here, when there actually is an instance of them like directly and indirectly killing their own people,
it's supported.
It's
freedom and democracy.
It's freedom and democracy in action.
That's kind of paramoralistic, conversive thinking that these people engage in. They're fucked up in the head, they're just liars, they're massive fucking liars and hypocrites, So
I think what you're hinting at though is that this could well be Russia's.
Well, I'm just saying Russia has an opportunity. If this continues on for any length of time, Russia has an opportunity and would be within its rights and would have support, legitimate, not obviously from the European leaders and all that kind of stuff, but certainly would probably have, at a certain point, has precedent, but also a lot of support from the majority of the Ukrainian people. If in a short period of time they start to realize that, look, we all want this war to end, and that fucker Zelensky is saying no. And he keeps dragging our sons off the street and throwing them into the front line. I mean, do we need to have another Maidan? How do we get rid of this guy? He's basically killing us. He's killing our sons. And specifically, there was a dump, a hack. Russian hackers, right? There's a video of one of them talking, whatever, but they reportedly breached the Ukrainian General Staff's database just this past week, revealing catastrophic losses of the armed forces of Ukraine. According to the compromised digital registry, if the data is correct, Ukraine lost 1,721,000 troops, killed or missing, i.e. killed, mostly, over the 3 years of the conflict.
And it gets worse every year.
And that's a breakdown.
Wow. We're only like 2/3 of the way through this year.
Yeah. You're talking, you could get up to 1 million people this year, potentially. And throughout the war, Russia's losses have been consistently. I wrote that about the losses, Russia's to Ukrainians' losses were 70 times less Russians than Ukrainians. That was, I think, based on 2022 and 2023 data, when, as you see, particularly in 2022, the numbers were quite small, and maybe it was that then, and maybe even in 2023. But as things got worse for the Ukrainians, as they did, because they continued to increasingly lost the war and lost manpower and lost efficiency, and especially with Trump coming in and there being a lackluster or a lack of enthusiasm, let's say, for the full-on arming Ukraine. But it really comes down to manpower. They've definitely been suffering more and more losses, which means that the ratio went up. So I'd say, if it's 1,700,000 Ukrainian dead, you're probably still talking. I think latest numbers, there were never any numbers above 100,000 reported. Even up to the latest numbers.
I heard in Moscow 120,000.
Yeah. Right.
Estimate.
Right.
He didn't know.
As of now. So you're talking, that's probably a reasonable estimate, and that puts it at about 15 to 1. About 100, like about 1/15 of 1,700,000 is about 110, 115,000 dead, which is still a lot. But you're talking about 1.7 million in Ukraine. Like
It makes more sense.
But then
it makes sense for Russian morale in favor of the war, and it makes sense when the hysterics in the West about Russia,
and it makes more sense with the poll in Ukraine. Well, 70% of the people, they're all noticing it. I mean, with so many people actually left the country as well. I don't know what the actual numbers of the population are now. It's like, it used to be 40 million. It's down below probably 30 million at this point. There's like easily 4 million in Poland or something like that, or a few million anyway in Poland and in other European countries. Others have left to other countries. So, I mean, significantly less than 40 million at this point. And then when you take, upwards of 2 million, because that's just dead, usually injured, is 3 to 1. So you're talking about a few million, maybe talking about 3-4 million injured. So you're talking up to, between dead and injured, you're talking about 5 million out of in a country of maybe right now less than 30 million. You're talking about a 15% of the population. There's no way
that's like literally every household having someone either dead or maimed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So no wonder 70% of the population, or it's either literally everyone or literally 70% of households having someone dead or maimed. And when that happens, it's like
the thing is, though, you're right, and this is what the reckoning Ukraine is undergoing. But part of why we've been saying similar-ish things for 2 years now, going, surely they're going to rise up any day now, But there's so much money being pumped in from the West that I'm seeing clips of like women's professional soccer televised at stadiums with sponsors and everything, and pundits being aired in at least Western Ukraine and Kiev. Life is so normal there; they still have that going.
Well, they can do that,
but the money for that is coming from the West because it's a war of optics.
But that's propaganda.
So they're trying to keep up that everything's normal in Ukraine.
Of course, they're trying to propagandize
and to keep them on side, of course. But it's not working because the polls show.
And the vast majority of people are aware. Like the vast majority of people are that the small area of Western Ukraine that is relatively untouched by this is. But even them, they're not, because a lot of people are being mobilized from there as well. And I think maybe it's getting to the point where the mobilization is taking
in the West,
taking place across the entire country, as they're have less and less people to actually man the weapons type thing.
They're having to drill into their
reserves.
Their European Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Yesterday was Independence Day in Ukraine. Independence from what? Who never knows? Because they're certainly not independent today. Statements from Zelensky, who gave a TV address. I know. But now, in the context of what we just heard, Ukrainians are listening to that, and the vast majority of them are thinking, fuck you. Quote, Ukraine will never again in history be forced into the shame that Russians call compromise. Another quote, Ukraine has restored unity between Europe and the US. This is where I think he thinks him and Hillary and von der Leyen are solid, Ukraine has restored unity between Europe and the US and is now the foundation of this alliance. Ukraine is not asking, it is offering alliance and partnership, the best army in Europe, advanced defense technologies, experience of resilience.
And just people know, just people know about those numbers. You'll see in the West, the British MOD and all this kind of stuff are putting out numbers, and they're putting out numbers that are basically inverted. Right? And they're not exactly inverted, but they're putting out like Russia's lost 1 million men. The Ukrainians are somewhere around like 300,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 or something. So they have it not turned around on its head, but like massively
distorted
in the opposite direction. And of course, you expect that. Anybody who reads those numbers and doesn't look at the bigger picture, and look at the way the war's being processed and how Russia continues on, and how the Ukrainians are, having to drag people off the streets, and how they're being supported massively by the West and all this kind of stuff. And And just even from a military perspective, all you have to do is look at the relative difference in the actual military power of the two countries. I mean, if you paid any attention at all, you would know for sure that whatever the numbers are, it's not more Russians than Ukrainians. It's way more Ukrainians than Russians. That's just a rational blink that any normal person would take, except for the fact that outlets like the UK Telegraph and stuff and BBC or whoever else are reporting the MOD, and I think the MOD like is front and center in processing this war in Ukraine are not going to release propaganda in their favor. It's just like, people are clueless. Like, whatever, dude. It's just like a retard.
It's
can't help it.
It's an extraordinary war because, I mean, the conventional doctrine is that any invading force, if it wants to do anything in another place that's not their place, needs a minimum 3-to-1 force to do anything.
Right, and they didn't have that.
It's quite the opposite is what took place in Ukraine. So then you listen to the skeptics going, oh, well, look how it's taken 4 years or whatever for Russia to grind a few inches here, a few inches there. But they're still thinking in conventional terms that Putin is trying to sweep across Ukraine and take it all. No, you dipshits. It's really obvious at this point that it's taking place in a functional way. It could be anywhere in Ukraine for that matter. It happens to be in a densely ethnic Russian place, but it's carefully, like you said, it responds to to international issues, to political sentiments inside Ukraine, what's happening politically in Kiev with Zelensky and Zelensky, and there's factions, and it's intense here, and then it's not. And then there's a breach, and they let them have their counterattack, and in Kursk and stuff, and then that's dealt with slowly, methodically, not crazily. It's also methodical, and if our scenario is in any way the actual one that is massively reversed in Russia's favor, the invaders' favor, then there's no historical comparison.
But
people can't use a war.
All people have is the First or Second World War.
Yeah, they think it's trench warfare.
They think because it's Europe, then it's like the Second World War, because that was the last time you had a war in Europe, right? So it must be like Second World War, where you just you had meat grinders, and use all these terms, meat grinders and throwing troops at artillery and all that kind of stuff. It's obvious that obviously wasn't the case from day one. Anybody who's been watching this war and how it was being pursued from day one by Putin, it was obviously designed to minimize Ukrainian civilian casualties and most importantly, maybe to minimize Russian military losses. Putin was like, we're not like throwing people at this. We're going to go as slowly and methodically, like you said, as we can, and it's going to be a war of attrition.
All right,
we have very clear goals. We want these 4 regions in the east, and we're going to secure those 4 regions, and we're going to take however long it takes to get those 4 regions, but we're going to minimize casualties on our side and maximize casualties on our side. We're going to attrite their forces down to nothing
while minimizing civilian casualties on their side.
Course.
I mean, that's a first. There is no 20th century comparison for that.
But people can't believe that because
it sounds fanciful.
Well, no, because Putin's a dictator.
But they convince himself that
Putin's an evil dictator,
Hitler,
and he would just
slaughter
people.
It's a completely novel phenomenon. There is no fucking precedent.
Well, there probably is in history. I mean, there's been a lot of war throughout history where someone's gone about it in that way, but
it's almost the way that it's been.
It's almost like a guerrilla war on a state level.
Yeah,
that's actually a really good comparison for it, because it's like all the strategy that Russia has taken so far is playing to its strengths, because it knows that
sit back. I mean,
it doesn't have to. Not only does it not have to go no holds barred, throw everything we got all at once. Not only does it not have to do that, it would be it's not in its interest to do that.
Absolutely not.
Because then they can't use the optics of how they've been doing it to continue doing it. It would, in fact, draw all of the countries in directly, which then would screw them.
Yes, and they can't have. They had to be very careful about the amount of casualties that they're taking on the Russian side for public opinion back home.
Exactly,
because if there's say 100,000 Russian dead, then that's 100,000 families who have lost a family member, and that's quite a lot. But it's still very small compared to the total population of Russia. If it was much more than that, if you're talking into the millions stuff, you would get to the point where you would have public sentiment would spread kind of organically in a weird kind of mass consciousness kind of way. And it would be turned against the war. It would be much more difficult to have so much support for the war that there clearly still is in Russia, and people are okay with it, and people seem, and the government itself is happy to continue. The opposite's happening in Ukraine, as an example of this poll, and if they push it further, they're going to get to the point where there'll be there already has been public protests.
Oh yeah. There's been a number of them,
and they'll get worse. And the only way they can keep that under wraps is by suppression and dissent and controlling the information that gets out there. But internally, it's not going anywhere. And just to get back to what we're saying about Russia having the quasi-legal, let's say, as per the rules-based international order, legal right, authority, and even moral obligation to do something about this illegitimate regime in Kiev that is killing its own people and thumbing its nose at the wishes, the democratic wishes of the Ukrainian people. Lukashenko reported. He basically reported that this week, he said it on camera, I think, that he had been talking to he was in Moscow and he'd been talking to some of the people in the government and stuff, and he said that there's a group of hardliners around Putin who are demanding that Putin just cut this shit out and take out the decision-making centers. That's the term they use, right? That means the government, the decision-making centers in Kiev, i.e. the government, Zelensky et al., and anybody else who's hanging around him, and just because now's the time to do it. And Lukashenko said that Putin's response to that was absolutely not. And why not? He said because there'd be nothing left of Kiev if we were to use because the suggestion was to use Orezhnik. That's what these hardliners are saying. Use Orezhnik and take out the decision-making centers, i.e. the Ukrainian government, and Zelensky, get rid of him and create a space for the will of the Ukrainian people to express itself, because it's being blocked now by these people, Zelensky et al. And his friends in Europe. But I think, I'm not saying it was deliberately done that way, but it's interesting that he put it out there, because I think, like we've been saying, now and in the near future, the time actually is very ripe for that kind of thing to happen. Like, these hardliners are not really hardliners, let's say, if you're a fly on the wall, let's say, or if there is some kind of attempted subterfuge going on here, it's an attempt to lull the Ukrainians and the Europeans into a false sense of security that Putin is such a peacenik. Because you have to remember, the way we described he's processing this war, they all know that. The propaganda that we're getting that Putin's lost millions of men and that he's killing all these civilians and he's a brutal Hitler-like warmonger who's just throwing men into a meat grinder and killing civilians all over the place.
They know they
know that's not true, and they know that he's processed this war in a very careful, calculated way in order to avoid civilian casualties and to avoid deaths among the Russian soldiers and stuff. And they're a bit puzzled by it in a certain sense, but I suppose they recognise that that's what's going on. So they see him, like you said, as a peacenik, essentially, that he's a bit timid. He's definitely been very timid in this conflict,
which has only increased Kiev and the Euros' rhetoric and bravado.
Yeah, that's exactly. They think keep going, and the Americans as well.
That's
Trump.
Why they see no risk with
right.
What are you talking about, Trump? We don't need peace.
Trump's not going to use nuclear weapons. That's all nonsense. He's such a peacenik. He'll never do that. Yeah. And he would never take out Zelensky. He had plenty of opportunities to try and do that.
Yeah, he hasn't done it.
And he talks it up like, watch out, accusing or threatening the British, saying, UK is only so many, well, mainly through Medvedev, actually.
Yes.
Is only a few minutes or whatever, 10 minutes from...
Medvedev is...
Or missiles could
alter ego.
Yeah. our missiles could be in London in 10 minutes, so watch what you say and blah, blah, blah. But they know Medvedev, just the mad dog, whatever, and Putin behind the scenes is like, look,
Dima,
calm down. We're not doing that.
Don't post that.
This isn't where this is going, Dima. Don't be so belligerent. We want our security interests respected. We want some security. We're peaceful people. We just want some security. And the more he's acted like that, I mean, he can say that, but as long as he has continued to act like that over the past 3.5 years, the Europeans, despite their mistrust and suspicious minds and that kind of stuff, they start to believe that he actually is like that. So you take that to a point where it's locked in. They really think that Putin is not the kind of person who's going to take some kind of a
decapitation,
a shocking, aggressive action like that and have Lukashenko repeat it, just to put it out there. Maybe even just within a few weeks or a few months of him actually doing it. Because, like I said, the time is right, especially with... Because,
well, he's got an ally in Trump now.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah. It could be interpreted that way.
Yeah. I mean,
he kind of needed Trump. Okay.
But I think it would have happened anyway. If it's going to happen, it would have happened anyway. Reznik's would eventually be used on Kiev. But Putin has not done that because he's been respecting the will of... You could argue that, I don't know if it's true or not, but has not taken out Zelensky at all in Kiev.
Because it could be breaching free will.
It's effectively, he's respecting the will of Ukrainian people to support Zelensky in defending their country against Russia's invasion. But as soon as they turn around and say, no, we want this to end, he's like, well,
I did it for Ukrainians.
I mean, they've just started to attack those territory or the recruitment centers, because they got the impression, and from different sources of information, etc., that ordinary Ukrainians were very unhappy about that, about their sons and fathers, etc., being abducted off the streets and thrown into the war. So whenever they started, because it's only in the past couple of months that they actually started targeting those centers. They could have done it before, but they only started recently because they got information that this was something that would actually be supported or popular among the Ukrainian people. So if at this point, if this continues on, I think it will, and Zelensky becomes less and less popular amongst the Ukrainian people, well then Russia will be like, well, the door's open to get rid of him.
Okay. And then there's a vacuum, or maybe Russia's prepared something to fill put their guy in. Do a reverse Maidan.
I think we'll have to have
a closure on 2014.
I think they'll have to have some kind of a Maidan. There might be some fallout from that. From if you took out the Zelensky government, basically got rid of Zelensky and all the people around him. They're no longer there. They're being erased. Then there will be an opportunity. If Russia,
London, Paris, and Berlin will go ballistic because they need Zelensky.
I know,
there.
But they can do nothing about it.
Yeah.
And if that vacuum of power, if Russia has the capabilities, I don't know if they do or not, to actually, start some kind of a
mass media,
a groundswell, grassroots
color revolution,
kind of a revolution, but in order to not allow the Europeans to sweep in and just stick some Zelensky Part 2 in power and keep things going.
Which may be the urgency for why they want Euro troops. Maybe it seems dumb on the surface because, like, dude, you're not going to take on Russia. They know that, but they're going to put Euro troops as close to Kiev as possible
to control the people.
Because they've assessed that Putin is a peacenik pussy. So let's put Euro troops there. He won't strike them, and they'll act as a kind of almost like human shields to prop up and sustain the Zelensky regime.
Yeah, against the Ukrainians.
That may be
against the Ukrainian
for why
people.
They want.
Yeah. Not against Russians, against Ukrainians.
They want Euro troops to be like an
enforcer, a European enforcing European policy on a new Ukraine post Zelensky, which is we get another Zelensky and fuck the will of the Ukrainian people.
Yes, but
someone who will continue.
Do you know what? I think functionally the enforcer for Kiev has been the Nazi cadres.
The Azov.
You notice those shitheads are still marching all over like Odessa and places. I'm like, why have they not died at the front yet? Because they don't recruit them. They keep them.
No, they're the home guard.
Terrorizing.
They're the home guard.
Everyone else in Ukraine.
They're always helping the home guard to keep Ukraine Nazi, basically. people at extreme right.
To keep the minority,
extreme right
to
wing.
keep the
Same as-
minority in power that the CIA put in there in 2014.
Right. Well, before that.
It's funny, Zelensky was elected with around 70% in 2019 on the mandate of ending the war against the Donbass. And that figure has cropped up again. But this time, at least back then, it would have included people in the 4 regions, or at least 2 of the other ones. Now it's 70%, excluding the 4 regions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you see Salvini mocking Macron's Euro army?
Tell him just put on a helmet and go over there himself.
And Macron, he pulled up the Italian ambassador.
Why he's saying bad things to me? Explain. This is not very right. This is not very correct. You cannot say bad things about me.
The Elysee pulled up Italy's ambassador for the insult because the French foreign ministry said the ambassador for Italy was reminded that these remarks went against the climate of trust and historical relationship between our 2 countries. This is it's all of a piece. Like the Euro elites in European capitals absolutely depend on each other and Zelensky over there, because that's their base. They must support each other. Or if one falls, they're all done for.
It's that big 5, Brits, along with the European, von der Gaultier von der Leyen of Europe, and the Brits, Germans, the French.
Zelensky has
the
no.
Italians.
He's just he has no idea. Did you see his quip when he was talking with Trump in the Oval Office? It went very different to last time. He was talking about defending Ukraine, blah blah. He was doing his thing, but at the point where he said something about this is why we have no elections, Trump interrupted him and said, "Oh, wait now," to get a clarification. So, in a state of war, you can postpone the elections. Oh, that's something to think about for 2028 or something like that. And Zelensky, just enjoying the camaraderie, says, you like that, eh? Isn't it funny?
But then
and then Ukrainians are going to hear that.
Yeah. Well, but he wasn't being serious. Like, yeah. So, yeah. I think it'll come to an end relatively soon because those numbers are unsustainable, and I think they're jostling now for like we were saying, a kind of post Zelensky. They like to keep Zelensky in power, or at least have some kind of transition where it's handed off to some Zelensky Part 2 type thing. And I think that's something that again that'll be an opportunity ripe for the Russians to throw a spanner in the works there, throw a monkey wrench in the works of that, stopping that, the attempt to continue on this fascist kind of regime in Ukraine. They want to put an end to that, basically, and the only way they can really do that is to really take them all out in some kind of a strike, and then hopefully, maybe if they can, like I said, have people in the country, their own operatives in the country, have a reverse Maidan. Or
at least try
to kick one off
of some kind.
Yeah, but get the people in the streets, basically, so that they can actually, have an end to the conflict and not see it as being something that's going to be kept on the back burner or kept boiling over for the foreseeable future. Like, I'm sure the Ukrainian people don't want this to go on for another 10 years. Like, who would? You get tired, And the Americans, they're, I suppose, happy under Trump, I suppose they're happy to, at least Trump would be happy enough to see that happen. I'm not saying you get some kind of a pro-Russian necessarily, but you get somebody who's kind of moderate or whatever. It'll all have to work itself out over a number of years, like, as well. Ukraine is going to have to be reformed over a number of years into something. Something. Ideally, and the Russians, that will have to be just watched as it plays out. You know, it's not like Zelensky's gone. You put in a pro-Russian government, and then everybody's happy. Europeans go away, everyone's happy from one day to the next.
No, I think it's
you know what I mean. It's years of
their own statements of the connections of all their power. For me, means what happens in one place could well have knock-on effects everywhere. I mean, there's a meme going around where the EU flag is now the EU flag with the Ukrainian trident in the middle of it. They really have hitched the fucking wagon to this.
It's not going to happen, though. That's all just propaganda. That's all just to Slava Ukrainian, get the people in Europe, try and keep the people in Europe supportive of Ukraine. You know, they want to keep people, obviously that's a big part of their propaganda, is keeping European people, like European governments need to keep European peoples ideologically on song with them. You know, they can't have the whole of Europe turning against the war in Ukraine and suddenly seeing this as actually, because, you know, they've been quite successful in convincing European peoples that Putin is the aggressor and he invades Ukraine and you have to push back against Putin because Putin's going to invade Europe, blah, 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 right? So everything around that is all, you know, putting the Ukrainian flag here, there and everywhere is all part. It doesn't mean that they're trying to turn European countries into Ukraine and have like French versions of the Azov battalion.
I'm saying when there's protests in Kiev, there'll almost certainly be protests in one of the big four simultaneously. About everything. The whole woke agenda, the mass immigration.
That's not associated. Like, protests in Ukraine would be about the war
and
about attempting to continue the war on. There's no direct association between the two, you know. At least what I'm talking about is after Zelensky and his goons have been taken out, if there was an attempt by people in Ukraine along with their European allies to shunt someone in who was basically just the same, and the Ukrainian people would know who they are, and that they're going to continue this war. That in fact this aggression against the Ukrainian state, taking out our government, means that we're going to up the war and we're going to mobilize more people to continue our attacks in Ukraine. The protest would be against that, you know, but it would be contained within Ukraine, like, because it's very specific to them.
Yeah, and then the next step from that, logically, if it can't be resolved, who are we kidding? It's not going to be resolved politically. It's going to be a civil war. What nearly always happens after a major war is a civil war. I mean, that's just like tick-tack. Yeah. They go together all the time. So isn't a likely scenario a civil war in Ukraine, because you're going to have ardent, highly trained Nazi fuckers. They're not going to just, oh goodness, there's a political mandate. It rejected us. They're not going to roll over.
And as bad as it might seem, that would actually...
The Brits have Zelensky cooking over in London, preparing for an alternative.
That would suit the Russians, you know, as unfortunate as it would be, but a civil war in Ukraine would just be part of the process of it working itself out, and maybe a further division of Ukraine. Ultimately, after a civil war, you can have a further division of Ukraine depending on who took up arms or which groups, because you're going to have at least some members of the Ukrainian military who are going to fall on one side or the other, you know. I mean, there's all sorts of divisions can appear that aren't quite apparent right now because it's all Ukraine against Russia, but internal divisions suddenly appear after or come out as a function of that civil war. Like you said, that often happens after an external war. And you could have further divisions of the country, and maybe Russia would be, well, that's the way it has to go, then that's the way it has to go, you know. So it's messy, you know. And
I don't think the mess will be limited to Ukraine. I totally get it. It's totally different.
It's a very specific thing, but at the same time, too, like there's the Nord Stream pipeline and the way that was destroyed, and the way that so many things were done in the name of, you know, we have to fight Putin.
Sorry, your shower is cold now. It's Putin. But that story no longer has... The reason for Germany's deindustrialization sort of goes away. And so why does it keep happening? And by the way, why isn't the AfD in power? What I'm getting at is like the British themselves are putting out policy papers about really high risk here of civil war coming up. Now, is that propaganda to justify control measures against the population, or is it an actual analysis of the situation in the climate inside Europe?
Well, that's a separate thing about internal stressors within different European countries that don't have anything directly related to Ukraine. Like, I just don't. I don't understand or see how a change in government in Ukraine, or like or a civil war in Ukraine over who's going to be the next government, would simultaneously cause some kind of uprising in Europe among European peoples. I don't see any connection between those two. There's obviously stuff going on in Europe that could lead to some kind of a, yellow vest movement or something like that in Europe, or some kind of. But that would all be dictated by issues internal to those specific European countries. Like, for example, in the UK, you've got people who've been arrested for putting the St. George's flag up and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's very specific, and in fact, that's almost like you could, if you wanted to, you could put those people, those British nationalists, in the same camp as the Azov types in Ukraine.
No. Those British nationalists are being told every day, "Get ready, we're sending you to Ukraine."
No, but that's not what they're fighting about. Like,
that's not what it's actually about. But that's the shit they're being hit with. That's energizing
it would just be yet
a
another
sense
thing.
of our government is completely beyond.
Right, but these are separate issues, right?
Yeah,
we're talking about separate issues. We're talking about revolution in Europe or in European countries. That's about issues unrelated to Ukraine.
Okay.
Right? Or how are they related to Ukraine? I don't see any connection between
energy,
like the
geopolitics.
The specifics in terms of what people would be complaining about. Like specific what people like. You just suggested that. I suggested a scenario where there'd be an uprising or some kind of internal conflict in Ukraine over a new government after it had been taken out, as a result of this war and all kinds of stuff, or as a continuation of this war, let's say, or as a function of this war. But you were saying simultaneously there would be uprisings in Europe because of that. At the same time, they would both happen at the same time.
No, I would
say they're not
it's
far downstream.
Huh?
They're not far downstream. I think we need to visit Brussels and the EU buildings to get a sense of, like, they're not just going to change the decor, like with the Ukrainian flags everywhere. They're so committed to this that Macron said this week when he got back from Washington, he described Russia today as an ogre, a predator, a beast that needs to feed and feed to sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just for argument's sake, say he's a psychopath and he has just projected, in fact, what the European Euro elites are and what they need. If the ever constant expansion of Europe and markets is arrested, at the very least just arrested, never mind reduced by Russia's putting its big bear paw down in Ukraine, I just think it's going to, it needs to grow and grow, or it's done. I'm not sure how exactly, but it's nonlinear effect of the way these. Yeah, it's not a coherent argument. Okay.
Well, no, I was thinking more along the lines of the. I mean, there's not a direct correlation. Like you were saying, it's not that it would be. It's not that it's clear or obvious that if Ukraine falls, that then there would be protests in the street and calls for there wouldn't be any of that. But I think it would nevertheless be in the minds of the people that we had to endure all of this bullshit and all of these stupid measures and policies because we were supposed to be helping these guys.
But it could just be seen as like, I mean, that would just surely that would just be spun if the Russians were to take out Zelensky and his government in the current climate, especially amongst the people who have bought into the Slavo-Ukraini, Democrats, that would see it as just further Russian aggression. It would be spun as further Russian aggression, like in fact, more Russian aggression, like the final Russian aggression type thing of actually taking out the government. First of all, they invade the country, kill all these people, blah 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 blah, and now they're taking out the government. Super evil, super evil Russia. Thank God we cut off Nord Stream 2 from those evil people.
I mean, that would be the messaging, but what would that look like in terms of the people and what they actually think and how they actually view things? Because the two are not synonymous.
Yeah, well,
not entirely synonymous. So I would be curious to see how it all played out, because I think it's possible that it could be like Neil was saying, that there is not a direct connection, but a connection down the line. But that, I think, is dependent on how things actually go.
Ultimately, people, if anybody's going to have an uprising in France or in Germany or in the UK, it's going to be about internal issues. It's going to be against their own government. The French people, ultimately, as much as they might say, yeah, Slavic Ukraine, they care about issues in France, like. Anyway,
yeah. It was just a feeling. It wasn't a theory, but it's
a feeling.
Yeah, it's a globalized world, and energy markets over there will naturally affect. And I mean, when the farmers were protesting last in France, they were deliberately targeting products from Ukraine and throwing them off. The farmers knew this shit is hitting our bottom line at the end of the month.
Right.
So, same in Poland. I mean, the Polish farmers blockaded the border with Ukraine. That they see a connection with.
Well, that's only because it affects them directly. It's not they see or feel a connection, whatever. It's that they see it directly. It's like we're hitting our pockets because we see you importing Ukrainian grain into our countries, and we're taking a hit because of that.
Okay,
but it's like Russia just took out the Ukrainian government. Oh.
Look at it this way: our Euro elites are acting as if they're paranoid that this issue, if it doesn't go their way, means their heads. They do seem to be behaving as if that's what they're afraid of.
But
the Telegraph's putting out articles like Europeans should be absolutely terrified of Putin meeting Trump. Why? What do you mean absolutely terrified? Which Europeans are they talking about? They're talking about the Euro elites. And the article won't give you a concrete cause and effect, but it's kind of vague allusions to it.
Well, it's been on that all the time, that Putin would be ditching the world order and would leave Europe in the lurch because he's snuggling up to Putin, and he's going to engage in kind of a certain level of isolationism or withdrawing back American power from policing the world and supporting Europe, and it'll leave Europe exposed to the evil Russian bear. That's the reason, right? I say that. That's why you should be terrified. But it's nonsense, obviously. I mean, they say that, but it's just bullshit. So, and I mean, maybe there's a misconception there in the sense that, like, I don't. Zelensky government being taken out by Russia wouldn't be going wrong for the Europeans necessarily. At least not in that moment. It would be absolutely used as evidence to double down on Russian aggression.
Yeah.
And evil Russia, evil Putin. Look what they did. Who's next? Where the reaction is going to go next.
Yeah.
Y'all in Europe need to double down and support us even more.
Yeah.
Against Russia. You need to think doubly hard that Russia is an evil aggressor.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Ukraine will just be a sacrificial lamb. That's all it is for them. Germany's foreign minister, when asked about the nuts and bolts of actually chipping in and putting some German troops into Ukraine as part of this Article 5 like security guarantee in which the US supplies the Air Force to keep back the Russian bear, he said all the right things. Well, his leader, Merz, said all the right things in DC. Like, Merz explicitly pleaded for that in his 2 minutes with Trump. That's exactly what he articulated. This is what we want from you. What he was saying back home in an interview with Politico was, in German to the German people, was, no, the German military is, quote, too stretched to provide troops for Ukraine. But too stretched? And then he said, the thing is, we're the only European troop contributor to station a combat-ready brigade in Lithuania.
Mhm.
Doing that and also stationing troops in Ukraine would be too much for us.
Mhm.
That's how seriously, yes, when it comes to it, they are about protecting
the far cry from the Wehrmacht.
Ukraine.
Wehrmacht, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's
It's all talk at this point, you know.
I get you now. They could just they'll easily parlay what is objectively a defeat for them in Ukraine in a proxy war into
But I mean, that's just two steps.
Doubling down on conviction that it means, therefore, that, like we were saying, Putin is evil. And he could hit Lithuania next.
But that's even a step ahead. He's obviously going to. It's obviously, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's like, it's indisputable that if tomorrow a bunch of Rezniks are fired and take out the entire Ukrainian government and the House of Parliament and everybody in it, it's going to be presented as, on every broadsheet for days, evil Putin destroys the Ukrainian government, you know, assassinates all members of the Ukrainian government, and he'll be like, Putin killed my baby. It'll be worse than ever.
Yeah.
You know, that in itself isn't a loss for them. They haven't lost anything at that point. The only place where they might actually lose is down the line, that what happens afterwards, and then they would immediately go into, and probably have plans for it, they would immediately go into the process of trying to cobble together a new Ukrainian government with just a successor to Zelensky, that was of like mind and would continue to say evil Russia, and we want to be part of NATO, we want to be part of Europe, we need to keep, we need Europe support and American support to keep fighting against. Look what they've just done. Horror of horrors. But the question I was bringing up way back at the beginning, before we started all this, was whether or not the Ukrainian people would intercede at that point, and whether or not the Russians would have something in place to try and kickstart some kind of a popular grassroots revolution to stop that from happening, to stop the Europeans and the Americans, the deep state, whatever, from just shunting in a new cabal of Azov types into the Ukrainian government and then carry on as if nothing happened. And if the Ukrainian people say, no fucking way, this was our opportunity. A lot of us are actually not that unhappy that Zelensky is gone and the rest of them. And we want this to be an end to the war. And here you are with your European friends, trying to shunt in a replacement for him to keep it going. And if at that point they have some kind of an obviously internal kind of uprising or some kind of a mass protest in the street to try and stop that from happening. And obviously it gets very complicated at that point, and there's a process that it would follow, maybe a civil war, who knows what will come out of it. But for me, all of that's internal to Ukraine and totally disconnected from anything happening in Europe. And there's nothing in that would set a fire in the minds of French people to suddenly all rise up against the French government. Because what? I don't see any connection between them at all, you know. That's its own isolated thing. If there's something going to happen in Europe, that you can look at each different European country and see how that might actually play out, but it will be to do with internal issues. I'm not saying they're not connected to the whole globalist bullshit and sending weapons to Ukraine and money to Ukraine and all that kind of stuff, but right now that's not what people are. People haven't fixated on that, you know. Like I said, in the UK, the people, the furor or the upset about people being arrested for painting George's crosses on different places has nothing to do with sending money to Ukraine or supporting Ukraine. That's Starmer, the radical fascist lefty, trying to shit on our heritage and bring in a bunch of migrants. There is no word. The word Ukraine isn't mentioned in any of that, you know, in terms of people's minds.
Yeah. It's
they're all discrete. They're all connected, obviously, in a broader sense. But when it comes down to the average person, it's their own internal. People are focused on, you know, what's happening on my street type thing, or in my local town, or in my and what the causes are.
Yeah.
But I don't think people are smart enough to say. There's not many Alex Joneses going, it's the globalists, you know what I mean? Or looking at it from that point of view, you know. Some of them might, you know, the yellow vest would have a broader scale.
Yeah, I don't think it's
awareness of it.
I don't think there's any. No, it wouldn't be a conscious thing. I'm thinking long term.
Yeah, down the line.
It's
Yeah.
just down the line. It's not. Yeah, it's not linear.
Did you?
In Ireland? So this is totally separate from the UK. The George's Cross it's a very interesting phenomenon because the UK is the most heavily censored place on earth. In fact, statistically more so even as appears than North Korea. And people are having to get around the digital censors by just doing something innocuous on the streets. It's very much like a V for Vendetta situation in the UK, where, you know, in the movie scenario, people would paint the V sign, spray paint it just to signal to each other that we see it too. They're just simply painting the Red Cross on anything white.
George's Cross.
Because they initially were floating up English crosses.
Flags. Yeah.
Flags. But those have been taken down because health and safety or whatever bullshit reason they were given.
Racism.
So then they started painting it on anything white. It could be the sidewalk, could be zebra crossing.
Side of a building.
It's cool actually, even though, you know,
We don't like English.
it is a good form of protest.
Well, I mean, you have to say fair play to them for pushing back against that, because it obviously is egregious, ridiculous, like that the actual government would be. It's very similar to them criminalizing Palestine action. You know, anybody carrying a Palestinian flag or with a T-shirt saying Palestine action or something like that is immediately arrested and taken to the police station.
Have you seen the troll on that?
Yeah, plasticine action.
Plasticine action.
Yeah. That's a good way to do it as well. Plasticine action. It looks exactly like it, but you know, they don't want. What is it about?
Cops are stopping them with
AI.
a T-shirt that looks like it says Palestine action, but the mind is tricked. But then you read it. Oh no, it's plasticine. And they're on the phone to their bosses. We're not sure how to proceed here because it looks like their intent is to infringe the law on this now.
Because Palestine Action is a prescribed terrorist group, effectively.
And the cops are like, well, we'll let you go, but yeah.
Palestine Action is basically I mean, it's obviously, it's a setup, like it's fake. They're actually pro-Palestine supporters, or pro-Palestine, but there's a way around it. Because it looks like Palestine Action, but it says Plasticine Action, and they claim that they've got a little picture of Morphe's little stop action figure from the 80s, whatever, and they're campaigning against the use of AI in stop action animation that they need to go back to because you're taking jobs away from people. So you need to use normal people, real people to do this. So that's their kind of setup, if you know what I mean. Their narrative. But it's similar, like I was saying, to criminalize people supporting Palestine as criminalizing people flying or painting an English flag, because it's kind of ridiculous. You know, people supporting Palestine are basically just saying there shouldn't be any more killing of children. So, that's a crime. And people, it's in the same vein as people saying, you know, I like England because I'm an English person. We should have more English things.
You're like, well, you're in England, therefore, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. You know, I mean, of course, there's a subtext of, in both of them, in the pro-Palestine one, there's a subtext of anti-Israel sentiment, anti-Zionist sentiment, and pro-English, you know, painting English flags. There's a subtext of no more immigration. But you can argue, well, you can't really argue against those two things either. But the government then criminalizes that aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
One is an anti-Semitism and the other one is racist, which is more or less the same thing, even though they're not, neither of them. So, this was, speaking about Israel, do you remember your guy, Count Dracula? No, in the White House. The White House, was he the Pentagon deputy spokesman?
Miller,
yeah. He was on... it was really Channel 13. And he's actually said something since he left the Biden administration ended, and he didn't have a job anymore. He's also come out in the past, you know, earlier this year, saying things that are like, whoa, never expected you inveterate fucking liar. I never expected you to say anything truthful, you know. But he said something else. I can't remember what it was about, but he said something quite truthful. I think it was related to Israel as well, but he said something on Israeli Channel 13 recently as well. You can have a listen to it here.
Oh, did he?
I didn't get a link.
You didn't?
Oh.
It's consistent with the pattern we saw for many months. They were always looking for ways to add conditions or make the terms more difficult.
האמריקנים עוד עושים מאמץ חצי נואש להגיע לפשרה. מתארגן מפגש ביטחוני במצרים.
It's really our best chance to get a deal. And Hamas, for the first time, really was feeling pressure to agree.
הייתה מפה שאומרת, זה המינימום שצה"ל יודע לחיות איתו. בגדול, סביב טנצ'ר מעבר רפיח למשך 42 יום.
כלומר, פינוי הרוב המוחלט של ציר פילדלפי,
רק
סביב מעבר רפיח.
המפה הזאת לא קיבלה אישור להיות מוצגת, בעניין נתקע. הקבינט, חוץ ממני, מצביע בעד ההישארות בפילדלפי ל-42 היום נוספים.
We were really close to a deal, and the Prime Minister added these new conditions around the Philadelphia corridor and around Netzarim.
Anyway, there was more. You need to have been a Yiddish speaker to get all of that, because your other guy, former defense minister, he's basically saying the same thing. That every time Israel, or every time the Americans, even under Biden, got with talks with Hamas, etc., and Qataris and all that kind of stuff, to get a deal to stop the Israeli bombing and killing in Gaza, the Israelis would immediately
change the goalposts,
add new conditions, and then there would be no deal, which is not surprising, but it's interesting to hear. The fact of the matter is they all knew it. The Americans have known that a long time. So, and what they've known is that the Israelis have been intent on dealing with Gaza and the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank as part of a long-term plan. They've been this business since October 7th as part of that, and that they've never been serious about any kind of agreement. They've been, in fact, their biggest fear was that they would be forced into some kind of agreement that would force them to stop the war and the bombing of Gaza, because they're kind of like, look, don't you realize, like, this we're not really serious about the hostages. We're not really serious about saving them. We don't care about them. In fact, we're using them to justify bombing everybody, and we don't want to deal with Hamas. We want to kill them all. What part of that aren't you getting? I mean, have we not been bloodthirsty enough to make it clear that we just want to wipe? Hello? And have you not read about history to know what we're all about? What's Zionist? Like, Greater Israel, like making Israel safe, destroying the axis of evil, like, starting with the Palestinians, then the Lebanon and Hezbollah, then Syria, Assad, then Iran, so it's like anybody going along going.
But this guy saying this retrospectively, as if he's being honest now, it's sickening, because at every single step along the way, the slightest criticism of Israel, he was actively defending, even though he's just emerged from a meeting, say, where he's learned that they have gone and changed the goalpost again. His either instinctive or his well-trained or his politically agreed instinct, as he walks in the corridor from where he's just been told the goalposts have been shifted again, to going, good morning, press, is what's going on in his head is, okay, I have to keep going. I have to, how am I going to spin this well for Israel? Okay. He doesn't get to go afterwards. Okay, I'm out now. Hi, honesty time.
Yeah.
Well,
he's an active participant in the genocide.
Well,
he should be hung, like the rest of them.
Well, apparently
international law.
Yeah.
We don't have time this week. I really wanted to, but something's going on with Intel and chips. Maybe next week. It's ongoing. Howard Lutnick proudly boasted on X yesterday, that's Trump's Commerce Secretary, that the US government now owns 10% of Intel, the number 1 or 2 chip manufacturer. It's bizarre that there's something. So here's an outline of the deal in the Guardian. It's a write up of it. It's not alone. This is the most high profile version of what's happened recently. But as the first few paragraphs here make clear, this has been happening. This is happening to multiple high tech US companies. Trump says Intel has agreed to give US government a 10% stake. That makes it sound like it's becoming a public company. It's not quite like that. Unprecedented deal comes after President demanded CEO Lip-Bu-Tan to resign over his ties to Chinese firms. So that's probably how they strong-armed it into happening. The USG has taken a stake in Intel under a deal with a struggling chipmaker, okay, and is planning more such moves. Lutnick announced this on X yesterday. Trump met with Tan on Friday. The way Trump announced it, he walked in, wanted to keep his job, and he ended up giving us $10 billion for the United States. While Trump did not provide detail, the equity stake is about equal to the amount Intel is set to receive in grants from the government under the Chips and Science Act to help fund the building of chip plants in the US. This Intel investment will be the latest of several unusual deals struck by the Trump admin with US companies, including agreeing to allow NVIDIA to sell its H2O or H20 chips to China in exchange for the US government receiving 15% of those sales. Chipmaker AMD struck a similar deal.
That was the one I was thinking of, AMD and NVIDIA, given 15% of those sales.
So on the face of it, it's like you were saying to me, this is a workaround compromise, so these guys don't skip paying tariffs.
Yeah. Because it's cheaper, maybe.
But doesn't it also sound like this is trying to bring manufacturing bases home? In a multipolar world, having it far-flung over there is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, for sure. That's what Trump wants. Like he's talking about all the time, about them onshoring their operations.
Yeah, I can't separate it from this news, though. This is a month old, about Intel. I think their stocks absolutely tank after this. Literally 1 month ago, Intel is laying off 24,000 employees and retreating from some companies, namely Germany and Costa Rica. So to give you an idea, Intel employed 109,800 people at the end of last year, pushing out 24,000 people. This year shrinks its employee base by 1/4. Scotty, what do you think? Are they sucking in part because they're losing to China already? I mean, if I look this up officially, the US still dominates like 90% of the market for chips.
Yeah.
That is still the case. So how can they be hemorrhaging staff? Why are they wanting to downsize by 1/4? Any ideas?
It's kind of complicated because basically Intel has been sucking for years. So their processors, beginning with like the 10th generation, were not so good. Now they're on 15th generation. So each iteration was kind of evolutionary instead of revolutionary. And then AMD picked up competition, blah, blah, blah. Intel's processors haven't been very good. So they started off with basically Intel struggling. After decades of being the dominant chip maker, like they made bad decisions. They had problems with their lithography, their designs, and their different nodes, the lithography nodes, 7 nanometer, 10 nanometer, whatever. Now they're down to they're actually using TSMC to manufacture their newest processors. So they have actually a lot of problems in making. As a company, they're in trouble. And so they laid off people. They brought in the new CEO. The idea that they're going to actually manufacture chips on U.S. soil, that's already fallen flat on its face because they invested like billions in some place in, I think, a couple different places. One of them was supposed to be like Ohio or Texas, or I don't remember where. But they started building the plant, and then just like a couple months ago, there was a news story that, they started like I think they built the place and they started moving equipment in, and then they went, oh shoot, yeah, we have to actually scrap all this equipment because the technology has advanced, so now we need new lithography machines. So this is probably not going to work. And that's when they went with TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturer, the big one. So it's all kind of a mess. And like, it's the same thing with Trump wanting to build the iPhone in the US. Like, it'll take 10 years to get everything up and running. And even if you have the manufacturing capacity, what about the raw materials? You need to get those mostly from China. So I don't know what the point of taking a 10% stake in Intel. Now, they also said the other day, yeah, the US government's going to take a 10% stake in like Samsung. And I mean, that's like a South Korean company. It's like, I mean, I know they want to get their mitts on it and be like, yeah, we control you now. But like, that's not how it works. So
maybe it's like Joe suggested. They're calling this, they're happy for the headlines in the business press to say it's a 10% stake, because it suggests too big to fail. You have unlimited US government backing. You have the mighty imprimatur of the US Treasury stamped, this product is approved by Donald Trump. Whereas in fact, all it is sneaky workarounds for how to balance up the grants they get, like we saw under the CHIPS Act, with the goddamn tariffs they're meant to pay as largely foreign companies.
It sounds to me like Trump's just treating the whole thing like a business. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? He's treating the US government like a business. So if the US government and the US country, USA is a business, then it should have stakes like any other business. It should invest its money in companies. And of course, there's a leverage they can have over the company because they have a 10% stake. And also maybe they can bail it out, whatever, different ways they can support that company. But like Samsung, is he like South Korean company taking taking a 10% stake in that is like me taking a 10% stake in it. It's just I've been buying some shares, like, unless there's something else, but it's just like making money. Samsung looks good. I'm going to get me 10% of Samsung and sell it for twice the amount. I don't know. Maybe that's how crass Trump is, where he's just like he's just being literally a businessman, using
the US Treasury, to invest in
which
some
is
stocks.
What they kind of do that anyway. You know, they get other countries to invest in them, you know, by buying bonds and stuff. So I don't know, maybe he's got some new ideas about how to run the whole place, you know, make America wealthy again. But yeah,
some good news this week. Ghislaine Maxwell, we now know, she told U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, it's okay. There is no list. Case closed. There is no list that I'm aware of.
That's going to get her out of
There is no list, and Bill Clinton never got a massage, and Trump was never did anything untoward with anyone ever.
But she also said, I do not believe he died by suicide.
Yeah.
So are you saying someone was killed? No, she's not. She dismissed that too, because she said,
if it was murder, it was internal. Which
he said if someone wanted to kill him, they had plenty of opportunity to do it before. Why do it in prison?
Yeah. Which
is a smart point, because what she's saying is that leaves the most logical conclusion is he's alive. He was exfiltrated from that prison.
Mm-hmm. She, can you open that one, Scotty? The Prince Andrew's wife, Sarah Ferguson, known as Sarah Ferguson now, used to be the Duchess of something or other. She tried to put the moves on Epstein, according to, this again, Ghislaine Maxwell. says that Sarah Ferguson encouraged the friendship between Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. And the first line is, Sarah Duchess of York, she used to be called, yet tried to put the moves on Jeffrey Epstein. What a sordid bunch.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Totally.
the gang, the people they associate with.
Totally.
The cliques. But the interesting thing, I had an interesting kind of thought there during the week because I think I was watching something. I was watching actually a video of a guy who was on the west coast of Ireland near Sligo, and he was pointing out some of the scenery on the coast, and he pointed out castle something or other, which was, he mentioned was, what do you call him? I've forgotten his name now.
Where Mountbatten was?
Lord Mountbatten. Lord Mountbatten's family kind of holiday home on Sligo coast, from that he spent his summers at. And this was Lord Mountbatten, was the Queen Elizabeth II's cousin, and a big name in the royal family, World War II hero and all that kind of stuff. And he used to spend time in Ireland, as Ireland being during his era anyway, being a part of the empire. He had a holiday home there, and he would had a boat, and he would take his boat out. But it was since, and he was actually killed when the IRA put a bomb in his boat in 1979 and blew it up with him in it. Kind of like just underlining the statement, Brits go home. But it came out after that in recent years, including evidence from an FBI file on him that he was actually a paedophile. So no loss there for anyone. But Prince Andrew spent a lot of time with him at his various holiday homes when he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then Prince Andrew ends up having a penchant as an adult for underage girls, at the very least.
Yeah.
So, nice legacy there from this great uncle, Bertie, or whatever his name was. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know how that thing works, Anyway, those royals and all those people.
Parallel universe.
Yeah, a nasty one. Anyway.
Are we good?
What have you got?
A need for...
Anything from the MAGA files?
I've got a need for some
speed
jokes.
You do? Why? Have you got one?
No.
Why not? I got a need for some jokes.
Yeah. I'm just you've trained me. You've trained me to expect one.
I've trained you like a monkey.
I learned it from you.
I asked my 8-year-old nephew what he learned at school the other day. And he said, apparently not enough because I have to go back tomorrow.
Smart kid.
The sharp one.
School. Did you like going to school?
Sort of, not
Mixed.
really. Yeah, it was a mixed bag. I remember staring out the window a lot, wishing I was one of those birds floating around.
Yeah, I did and didn't. I was always promised, don't worry, the next bigger school you go to, like secondary school,
That'll be better.
University, it'll be more challenging and more stimulating for you. And I got to university and I was like, this is a load of nonsense. Because 9/11 had just happened.
Oh, yeah?
And they were doing politics. And like the elephant in the room is like, obviously 9/11, war on terror. Now we're invading Iraq. And everyone's just studiously avoiding it. This is insane. These are the intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they do now. I mean, by 2006, some postgrads were approving works on neocons, PNAC.
Yeah.
But there was 4 or 5 years there of just terror. You just PNAC, do not no, you can't submit that. No.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of incipient realization that you were encroaching on the J topic, and put it away. So yeah,
Avoid.
just fundamentally dishonest, you know.
Yeah. Still plenty of those around.
This is probably going to keep growing, but Venezuela, U.S. warships off Venezuela.
Oreshnik's in Venezuela.
No way.
Who said that? Maybe one day. They're just floating it to, just jerking the Americans' chains.
This thing about Maduro and the $50 million bounty, I mean, is Trump seriously going to... Because he got egg on his face when that Juan Guaido coup failed so badly last time in his first term. I thought it was interesting, though, that the headlines were full of, wow, U.S. warships sent to fight drug cartels, and everyone's going, oh my God. It's really about the oil, by the way. But then the next day, that sort of, just sequentially, they're not directly connected. The FBI raids John, I once cooed Venezuela, Bolton's house at a 6 a.m. dawn raid. That was the sequential. This just happened the next day, but because Bolton went on CNN and said, yeah, I was involved in that coup a few years ago. And then, again, it's separate, but Tulsi Gabbard stripped security clearances from 37 current and former intel officials on the basis that they were manipulating, politicizing intelligence. She also announced in declaring that she had done this, that, quote, this is the first step to aggressively get after our core national security mission and root out these deep state actors.
Good luck.
Separately, the next day, Hegseth, the media headline was Purge. It's just 3 figures, but Hegseth fired key people in the Pentagon, including the head of the DIA, who they fingered for having released what Trump called the fake news of the report about the U.S. strike signals.
Which was probably true.
In Iran. Right. But it was the leaking of it.
Not allowed to leak it. It means you're an anti-Trumper.
So we're draining the swamp.
Woo! It's happening.
It's happening, Adam.
Your dream's coming true, Adam.
I can't believe it. I'm so happy.
But you're not, because you wanted, at this point, you wanted tribunals and...
Oh, I wanted so much.
You wanted them all lined up.
Yeah.
But you do get to see John Bolton's house raid at 6 a.m.
And that did make me smile.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie. I was smirking.
I think it's I think it's a feint. I mean, there is obviously a drug issue, but Venezuela isn't the drug issue, so that's just a fig leaf. Venezuela's value to the US is the oil reserves, because Venezuela's oil is, and always currently still is, geared towards being refined at Louisiana oil refineries. So Trump is trying to get that plugged back in. He's posting threats about how we'll regime change you to make it happen. But in reality, like in the first week, he sent Grinnell, the gay former diplomat, ambassador to Germany, to arrange the return of U.S. Special Forces who'd been arrested and imprisoned for plotting the 2018 assassination of Maduro. And they were all like chummy. It was great. We're on good terms with Maduro. That was in week 1 in January this year. And then for 7 months, and suddenly there's a bounty of $50 million on Maduro's head. And you're like, oh my God, Trump's flipped again. He's got warships outside Caracas. He's about to go in weapons hot. And the next news development is John Bolton's been raided, you know. It's so Trumpian, because you're like, it looks like it's this. Oh, something totally different, you know. And so it goes. We're going to have to spend 4 years now doing this, because it's like the hot takes on Twitter will be old by that evening, because the reverse of what it looked like has just happened.
Yeah. Probably going to go in that direction. increasingly. Yeah. I accidentally used some dog shampoo today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling like such a good boy. There you go.
Woof.
Woof.
Woof woof. Yeah, so there you go.
My shirt's from Russia. Sorry, I can't tell you where.
And you can't tell him what it means either.
Not verbatim, but the gist of it, yeah. I think it's Lavrov saying, it's from that quote where he says back to a journalist, what, you don't speak Russian? Maybe it's time to learn. Something like that.
And it says Russian special language at the top.
In English. Okay.
Russian special language. Definitely
Special.
is. It definitely is.
Definitely special.
Special. All right, so we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching, commenting, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back next week with another one. So until then, have a good week. See ya.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.